Welcome back to the e-learning Core 3 Fixed Income Analysis, session 2.3. In this session, we will talk about theories of the term structure which are used to explain the slope of the yield curve. The main learning goal of this session is to introduce you to the expectations hypotheses and the liquidity preference theory, which are considered the main term structure theories used to explain the slope of the yield curve. As mentioned before, there are two main theories to explain the term structure of interest rates: the expectation theory and the liquidity preference theory. Both theories argue that long-term interest rates depend on short-term interest rates as well as expected future short-term interest rates. The difference between the two is that according to the expectation theory, investors are risk neutral, whereas according to the liquidity preference theory, investors are risk averse. Moreover, under the liquidity preference theory, investors have short investment horizons. The simpler theory of the term structure of interest rates is the expectations hypothesis, which is based on the assumption of risk-neutral investors. A common version of this hypothesis states that the forward rate equals the market consensus expectation of the future short interest rates. Moreover, there are no liquidity premiums. The yield to maturity is thus solely determined by current and expected future one-period interest rates. Based on the expectations hypothesis, an upward-sloping yield curve, as shown in the graph on the left-hand side, would be clear evidence that investors anticipate increases in future short-term interest rates. Another implication of the expectations hypothesis is that bonds of different maturities are perfect substitutes due to risk neutrality. Now let us have a closer look at the liquidity preference theory, where we assume investors are risk averse and that most investors have a short time horizon. An implication of these assumptions are that long-term bonds are considered riskier relative to short-term bonds. And since investors are assumed to be risk-averse, they are supposed to demand a premium for holding them. What does demanding a premium actually mean? A premium means that investors will only buy these long-term bonds for a lower price, which implies a greater yield to maturity. This behavior is also consistent with the view that in well-functioning markets, higher risk implies a higher expected return. The liquidity preference theory can be expressed as forward rates being equal to expected short rates plus a premium. Put it differently, the forward rate exceeds the expected short rate, and this difference is a liquidity premium which is predicted to be positive. Finally, it is important to note that the liquidity preference theory argues that forward rates are not a perfect measure for expected future interest rates, because forward rates are the sum of expected future interest rates plus the liquidity premium. Next, we show the implications of the liquidity preference theory more formally. Recall that due to the risk aversion of investors, the liquidity preference theory implies a risk premium. This means in order to attract short-term investors, the expected holding period return of a 2-year bond must exceed the holding period return of a 1-year bond. Since the holding period is 1 year, recall that the corresponding holding period return of a 2-year bond is defined as the price of that bond with 1 year left to maturity divided by the price of the same bond with a maturity of 2 years minus 1. The price of a zero-coupon bond with a maturity of 2 years, 1 year from now, is 1,000 divided by 1 plus the expected short rate in year 2. The price of a zero-coupon bond with a maturity of 2 years is 1,000 divided by 1 plus a corresponding yield to maturity to the power of 2. Rewriting this expression implies that the holding period return of the 2-year bond exceeds by definition the holding period return of a 1-year bond. Note that the holding period return of a 1-year bond is equal to the yield to maturity of this bond. Rewriting implies that the 2-year forward rate exceeds the expected short rate for year 2. This proves the implication of the liquidity preference theory that the forward rate is greater than the expected short rate due to a liquidity premium. Let's have a look at some yield curve examples. Suppose the yield to maturity of a 1-year bond is 5%. Panel A is based on the assumption of a constant expected short rate of 5% plus a constant liquidity premium of 1%, implying a forward rate of 6%. This results in a rising yield curve since forward rates exceed expected short rates. Note that such an upward sloping yield curve is commonly observed in practice. Another example is related to the scenario where expected short rates are declining and liquidity premiums increase with maturity. Despite falling expected short rates, the positive and increasing liquidity premium implies rising forward rates over time, which leads to an upward sloping yield curve. After having carefully studied session 2.3, please start with the review questions.